Welcome back to Kind of a Filmmaker. I'm Kevin, and today I have 5 more unique camera moves that you, if you are also kind of a filmmaker, should remember for your next filmmaking project. Number 41, the Wicked 180. In the movie Wicked, specifically in the dancing through life scene, we see a bunch of students rudely dancing on this impractical, circular bookshelf while Elphaba is trying to study. Bach makes matters worse by flipping the switch that makes the bookshelf spin faster without warning the people on it. In real life, this would cause serious bodily injury, but in the land of Oz, it only causes the students to dance harder. The hardest move of all, though, comes from this character as they jump from ladder to ladder and then over the camera and roll onto the floor. The camera here is on a Scorpio crane, which allows for near 360-degree steady movement. This allows it to roll or spin as it dollies backwards, creating a sort of optical illusion that makes it look like the stunt person is running sideways, ignoring gravity. Defying gravity, if you will, okay? Here's what the shot would look like if the camera didn't spin as it moved. Here we can tell by the movement of the frame that the camera essentially rolls 180 degrees before flipping another 180 degrees in a different direction once the stunt person jumps over it. The camera then continues to push forward once the person lands and eventually jumps through Jonathan Bailey's legs. They only had 4 attempts at this because the stunt coordinator didn't want the stunt person to get hurt. And wouldn't you know it, they only got it right on the 4th attempt. Number 42, the Mirrorless Mimic. In the movie The Substance, we see Margaret Qualley's character looking into what seems to be a mirror. As she's looking at herself, the camera seems to mimic her movements exactly, implying that this shot is actually from a first-person perspective. But this is an impossible shot. How did they stick a camera inside of her eyeballs? Well, what you're actually seeing here is a mix of at least 4 or 5 different shots on different lenses and from different angles, all stitched together in post. And at least some of the shot was accomplished by faking the mirror. In other words, there is no mirror in this shot. Instead, the camera is on one side of a fake bathroom wall, looking through a hole in the wall at Margaret Qualley. The cameraman then mimics her head movements to give the illusion of coming from a first-person perspective. And one of the most impressive aspects of this shot is when the camera mimics her lean forward, getting extremely close to her eyeball. From what I've read, this is actually a sequence of several shots combining a 24mm macro lens, a 100mm macro lens, a 200mm macro lens, and a Loa probe lens. The camera then pulls away and transitions into a more typical angle where the camera is actually behind the actress and is being keyed out of the mirror in the shot with a blue screen, as can be seen by this BTS photo. I will say that the transitions between the angles can look a little sloppy. The entire sequence feels a bit synthetically wobbly, and in this frame you can actually see where 2 shots were stitched together at the same time. So why would they go through all the trouble to create this incredibly complex shot instead of just filming her in a normal bathroom from an off angle? Well, if they did that, the shot would be seen as a third-person POV, essentially coming from the perspective of a disembodied spectator. But this scene specifically is about her own perception of herself, and shooting this shot in first-person POV helps to put the audience into her mindset as she is observing herself for the first time, more so than filming her actions from off to the side. Number 43, the Composite Cam. In the movie Nosferatu, directed by Robert Eggers, we see the camera rise with the character Thomas as he ascends the staircase of Count Orlok's castle. The camera follows him until it gets to the top of the stairs, where it then decides to push past him, going into the next room, seemingly of its own accord. Thomas then steps back into frame and walks to the right as the camera follows him. There are 2 interesting things about this shot. First, the movement seems impossible due to the architecture of the building. And it was impossible because what you are actually seeing in this shot are 3 camera moves stitched together in post. The first camera move is the rising action on the stairwell. The second is the push forward, and the third is the truck right. All 3 of these shots were shot on a Scorpio crane, which allowed for very precise, steady movement. The second thing I found interesting about this camera move, though, is the motivation behind its movement. Why does the camera just seem to blow past Thomas here? Usually the camera in a film follows the action, it does not lead the action. But I'll let DP Jaron Blaschke explain why he did this.
And the other thing is that, I kind of like to do is not really follow action. Like, the camera's the boss.
But I like that when the camera is doing its own thing and then the actor catches
yeah,
up.
It's a little more interesting than simply following action, and if someone kind of dips down to pick something up or whatever, it's just let them do it.
The idea of the camera being king is not one that I think works in every situation, but it is definitely a philosophy to consider when determining what your camera is looking at and why it's moving. Number 44, the Paranormal Pan. In the 2024 remake of Nosferatu, we see Thomas sitting at Count Orlok's table as the vampire goes off screen to the left, before immediately reappearing on the right side of the screen with a glass of wine. The camera circles around to this shot where Orlok tells Thomas to drink. Sorry, that was bad. As he takes a sip, Count Orlok again exits screen right before the camera begins to pan to the right, eventually showing him sitting at the end of the table. But with how slow Orlok has been moving this entire scene, we again have an instance where it seems like he has teleported to a different location in the short time it took for the camera to pan over to him. Seemingly teleporting. The DP Jaron Blaschke is using the camera here not to only show the audience time and space, but also to show the incongruence of the actions on screen with the shown time and space. The simple act of panning the camera gives the audience a sort of anchor point to relate the timing of the actions on screen to. What I mean is the pan takes about 3 seconds to complete, which means that it also took Orlok those same 3 seconds to go from pouring Thomas a drink to sitting down at the end of a long table. This creates sort of a visual cognitive dissonance because we would not expect Orlok to be sitting down that fast. The camera move emphasizes the magic of Orlok in a way that simply cutting between this shot and this shot would not, because when you cut, there is already a suspension of disbelief occurring in the audience because real life does not cut between one shot and another. But when everything is laid out in a long take, if something that doesn't match up with real time happens, it is clear and emphasized. Number 45. The Flipped Flip. The film La Chimera is a magical realism film about a man who has the ability to detect the presence of ancient burial sites. In this scene, we see him at work using this forked stick to help focus his chakras or something. The stick leads him directly in line with the camera, and as he flips the stick, the camera begins to flip as well. It flips 180 degrees, but it's during the final 90 degrees that something weird happens. We unexpectedly see the back of Josh O'Connor's feet, almost as if the camera has somehow teleported behind him during the flip. Another more extreme example of this comes late in the film when again Josh O'Connor is looking for graves when all of a sudden the camera begins to flip backwards this time, eventually arriving on an upside down shot of Josh in a position that quite frankly doesn't make any sense. Technically, it's not impossible for this type of blocking to happen in real life. In fact, this might be a practical effect where Josh O'Connor simply runs around the camera and faces the opposite direction during the flip. But I think this shot is to be taken more metaphorically, more dreamlike. In fact, the word chimera can be defined as an illusion or fabrication of the mind, especially an unrealizable dream. And the rest of this movie plays into this idea as well. These camera moves are supposed to make the movie feel dreamlike, as if people aren't in the places they are supposed to be in. There may also be some metaphorical interpretations of these camera moves as something like blurring the lines between the realms of life and death, these two realms being mirrors of each other only separated by a gentle movement. But maybe I'm looking too deep into it. What do you think?